Mo Jassim recently came out and said ADCC is working on putting together its first ever gi tournament. Now, at first, I think a lot of people were kind of skeptical about this news, but after speaking with some people pretty heavily involved in ADCC, it does look like this is going to happen. So now the question is, what does ADCC have to do to have its first ever successful gi tournament? Guys, this is Sean with PDMA, and today we are going to go over what I believe are 5 things ADCC needs to do in order to have their first successful gi tournament. And before we get into this list, if you guys want more up-to-date BJJ news, go ahead and click that subscribe button. That helps me out a ton. With that out of the way, let's get into it. And so the first thing I would like to see ADCC do in this new gi tournament is probably not going to come as a giant shock to anybody, but I think it's finally time that we start heel hooking in the gi.
I heel hook in the gi. I'll teach heel hooks to children. I do not give a shit.
And it's not just heel hooks I want to see in the gi. I want to see the introduction of all twisting leg submissions and a bunch of submissions that have traditionally been illegal in the IBJJF and other gi leagues. I just think it's time that we let adults, professional athletes that have been training the sport for a long time, add these tools to their toolbox and be able to utilize them at the highest level of competition. And if you want to go ahead and make the argument that at the lower belt ranks these things still should be illegal, that's fine. We can talk about that sometime in another video, but I'm talking about at the highest levels. I'm talking about professional athletes having these tools available to them. And the fact that they aren't in IBJJF right now, I've just always thought is pretty ridiculous. I mean, the reason that we're always given that these things are illegal is that because of the fabric of the gi, they come on quicker and can be more devastating submissions. At least that's what I've always been told. And okay, maybe there is a little bit of truth to that, but I don't really, like, these people are professional athletes, and obviously we have to take steps to protect the athletes, but at a certain point, the responsibility is on you to protect yourself. And if you find yourself in a bad situation and you don't tap, I think that's on you. And obviously, I'm not the only person who feels this way. There's a reason I chose this as the first thing to talk about. I think the community generally agrees that it is time that we let adults have these tools in their arsenal in gi competition. I think this is something that a lot of people have wanted to see from the IBJJF for quite some time, and quite frankly, we haven't. So I think this can actually be a very good opportunity for ADCC and a very good advertising opportunity specifically for them to be able to come out and say, hey, you want a heel hook in the gi? Come here and do it. And so that is going to be the first thing I want to see from ADCC when they put together this gi tournament. Make these submissions legal, especially at the highest levels. And now the second thing that I think ADCC really needs to figure out before they put this tournament on is how they're going to handle stalling. Stalling is a massive issue in IBJJF, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's not an issue in ADCC, but specifically with the IBJJF rule set, I think it really lends itself to stalling. Again, I know people are going to be in the comments making comments about how ADCC has stalling. I know ADCC has stalling. Every jiu-jitsu tournament has stalling. But I just find that in IBJJF, I see it a lot. Somebody scores a quick 2 points or even scores an advantage point and then spends the rest of the round running around in a circle and just avoiding any sort of engagement with their opponent. Now, do I know how to fix this? No, I don't. But I just think it is something ADCC needs to focus on, and I think it's a big issue that people have had traditionally with gi competition. Because, and this is just my opinion, it's a little easier to stall in gi. And I can hear all the gi people now saying, well, in no gi, you can just run away if you don't. Yeah, I know, you can do that, and people do it. But in gi, you can also just kind of hold on for dear life, and easier said than done, obviously sort of being hyperbolic here. But the point is, ADCC really needs to figure out a way to address this stalling. Again, this is an issue that's not just an IBJJF issue. This is an issue that ADCC itself has dealt with. I think they need to fix this in their no-gi competitions a little bit as well. However, I think gi can lend itself more to stalling, and I think ADCC needs to tackle this problem in order to have a successful gi event. And the third thing that I would love to see ADCC do in order to have a successful first gi tournament isn't actually focused on the highest level at all. It's actually focused on things like the opens or any situation where somebody can kind of come off the street and sign up for your tournament. And that's just being more competitor friendly than IBJJF. And so I'm kind of going to divide this point into some sub-points because that's kind of an overarching term here, being competitor friendly. And what exactly does that mean? Well, I think the first thing that means is staying affordable. Now, we can argue right now if ADCC actually is affordable, and obviously to some people it is, to some people it isn't. That's going to kind of depend on you personally. However, you can't really argue that ADCC isn't more affordable than the IBJJF. And just for starters, if you're not aware, for IBJJF, you actually have to pay a yearly membership to be a part of their organization, on top of tournament fees, which are traditionally higher than tournaments like ADCC. And by keeping the cost relatively affordable, I think you attract a lot more people. I have personally spoken to a lot of people, specifically in like that white and blue belt category, that like competing in the gi but haven't done an IBJJF because of how cost prohibitive it actually is. And that demographic of people is actually responsible for a lot of tournament fees that these tournaments make. Don't forget, most people that are competing aren't competing to one day be a world champion and make a bunch of money doing this. A lot of people are doing this because they enjoy competing or they want to challenge themselves or for any number of reasons, and especially at that white and blue belt level because there are just so many people. And so keeping the tournament affordable, I think, is something that ADCC, they're doing it well right now, and I just think they'd be really stupid to change that. And another aspect of being competitor friendly is getting rid of all of these like uniform requirements that the IBJJF has. You gotta wear this color gi, you gotta wear that. And I know a lot of you gi traditionalists right now are looking at the camera shaking like this. I get it. You want your white gi, you want your blue gi, and you want your black gi, and that's it. Some people have different color gis, and some people can't afford to buy another gi just to do a already cost prohibitive tournament. And so I think being a little more lax with the uniform rules is a really good opportunity for ADCC to point at IBJJF and say, hey, look at these guys. They're a little more old school. They do a little more traditional. We're new. We're fun. And maybe introduce some of these things that people have kind of been wanting, even if they haven't been super vocal about it for quite some time. And obviously, we have to keep things like the length of the gi in mind. You know, I don't really mind that IBJJF is pretty strict on that because it makes sense from a competition point of view. You don't want to accidentally give somebody an advantage going into the competition. However, the color of your gi or like what sponsors are on your gi, I just think if we can keep those rules a little bit more relaxed, I think that'll actually give ADCC a pretty big advantage. And the last thing under this umbrella of competitor friendliness, I think, is going to be publishing the rules in plain English or Portuguese, but just publish them in a language that the competitors will be reading and make them simple. Now, again, I'm not letting ADCC off scot-free here. This is an area where they haven't always been the best. However, we are talking about something new, and maybe this is an opportunity for them to address past mistakes that they have made on their own. And especially when it comes to gi, we are just going to have more rules simply because there are more things you can do. There's going to be rules about where on the gi you can grab. There's going to be certain rules about what gi and collar chokes are allowed and things like that. Whatever those rules end up being, write them down in plain English and enforce them. Now, I understand, this is a big ask because no tournament gets this 100% correct. I just personally find that when it comes to IBJJF, there's been some situations where the rules have not been, equally enforced amongst all people, and especially maybe some people from certain countries get a particular advantage. I don't know. Maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows? I'm just going to learn Portuguese. But back on topic, I think if ADCC can do all the things that I just spoke about, that will give them a real competitive advantage with this massive demographic of people who, again, maybe want to compete at a higher level, but they don't want to do IBJJF because of the things I just mentioned. If ADCC can go and advertise that, hey, we're fixing all of these issues you've had, that's an opportunity for them to attract a huge demographic of people who are currently underserved by the IBJJF. And so the fourth thing that I think ADCC needs to do to make this a successful event is to treat this event like an ADCC event. And that might seem like the most obvious statement in the world, but what do I mean by that? Well, ADCC kind of got where they are by making things into a big production. They do the marketing, they put the highlight reels on social media, they make sure that you care about the people that are in the finals. There are storylines going on with all of the competitors. ADCC needs to keep this same energy with the gi. And so just to clarify a little bit more what I mean by this, I just don't want to see the ADCC gi tournament or gi division or whatever we get become some sort of sideshow where we come to ADCC for the main event, all the no-gi stuff, and yeah, we have a gi division over here, but look at ADCC no-gi. No, I think this is a really great opportunity for ADCC to continue to capitalize on the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because while, as I'm making this video, no-gi might be the dominant form of competition Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu currently, there is still a very, very, very dedicated gi fan base. And I think by showing those fans that, hey, we're here to serve your community too, I think that could go pretty far into repairing some of the damage that ADCC has kind of done to the more traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community that they haven't always gotten along with. And again, the way that they do this is show them that they're important. Make a big spectacle that they've never seen out of the sport that they love, their gi jiu-jitsu. And on the flip side of that, we also have to take what these people like and don't like about ADCC into consideration. So I don't want to see ADCC just necessarily copy exactly what they're doing in no-gi. More learn what that community likes, learn what traditional aspects of the sport they like, learn what ADCC has done with no-gi that they don't like, and work that in, but make this a recognizable Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ADCC event. And so I just think this is a massive opportunity for ADCC to reach some of these people and say, hey, I know you haven't always loved the way we've done things, but we are going to take the things that you love about your sport and then give it that ADCC spin. Give it this big production value, do all the highlight reels, build your storylines, and showcase your sport the way it deserves to be showcased. And so the fifth and final thing that I think ADCC needs to do to make their gi tournament a success is ban guard pulling. Leave the guard pulling in the IBJJF. We don't need any of that around here. I'm just kidding, Kyle. We're still going to have guard pulling. Yeah, sorry, but I just wanted to make the point that people who complain about guard pulling in BJJ are indeed the Kyles of the BJJ world.
Body blows in front of the sequoia tree. 4:20 p.m. 4-0.
Anyway, here is the actual fifth and final thing that ADCC needs to do to have a successful first gi tournament. ADCC needs to bring in and advertise the big names in the gi world and not just throw a gi on the no-gi people. And actually, from what I've heard, that's exactly what they're doing, so let's just keep our fingers crossed. I personally would love to see somebody like Mayssa Bastos or Pato be entered into this. And there's actually an individual that you might not be thinking of that I really want to see in this, and that's Harrison Gabriel. And if you're not familiar, Harrison was a coach on the inaugural season of the UFC BJJ Road to the Title, and kind of the big story when he got announced was, why is this gi guy coaching all of these no-gi people? But I think during the show, Harrison actually won over a lot of the crowd. I know I, had kind of sort of heard of him before, and after watching the show, I'm a huge fan of his. He seems like an awesome guy, and I think he's actually probably a pretty good pull for ADCC to bring in because he has that gi competition experience, and he's very well liked, and obviously we know that we can advertise him because the UFC did kind of a great job of building him up as a person, so I would love to see him in this. And ADCC has kind of done this in the past, but if they want to go the route where they're like pulling in like legends of the sport and having them compete, I think the move would be to get somebody who stopped competing recently, and I think a good person who could fill that role would be like an Adam Warzinski who, up till like a year ago he was competing and then announced his retirement. He's not too far out of the sport, he's still relatively young, and he is a big name that people love in gi. And with that point done, that is the 5 things that I think ADCC needs to do to have a successful first gi tournament. Now, you might have noticed I didn't go into the pay structure or anything like that. I think that's a topic for a whole nother video, and I do just want to say this now, just in case there's any confusion on this. ADCC, please pay these athletes what they're worth. And now it's my favorite time in the video where I get to ask, what do you think that ADCC needs to do to have a successful first gi tournament? Do you agree with the things that I listed, or do you have some better ideas? If you do, or if you agree with me, leave that in the comments. I would love to hear what you think on this whole ADCC getting into the gi competition space. And with all that being said, I just want to say thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.